let's move on to the next area, which is the command panel, which is this particular tool that you can see here. As I said earlier, it's quite an important area, Max. It's equally as important as the main toolbar. And it's actually made up of 6 main areas, of which probably 2 are the main areas that you'll be using from day to day. And these are the left 2 icons here. The first one is create, and the second one is modify. So if you hold the mouse button over it, you can actually see it gives you a tooltip. Create, modify, hierarchy, motion, display, and utilities. So firstly, let's have a look at the create panel. The create panel is actually a gateway to various other sub areas of the creation panel, and it's used, as the name suggests, to create objects in Max. And you've seen so far during this tutorial that I've been using it quite frequently to create teapots, create cubes. So it's quite a pivotal part of Max, and it's something that you'll be starting with pretty much on every single project, because you'll be going to there and you'll be creating your cubes, creating your characters, your dragons, whatever, your lights, your cameras. Everything gets created through the creation panel, so you can imagine it's something that you'll be working with a lot. Let's get rid of these objects so we can do a little bit of new creation. You can see it's actually broken up into, as I said, several sub-areas. The first area is geometry, the second area is shapes, and you can see as you click on these icons it brings up a different range of buttons below, and also a different flyout here, which actually allows you to choose various subtypes. So this, if you can imagine, if this was a menu, this would actually be quite a branching structure that you've got here. As I said, there's quite a lot of functionality packed in here. So you've got, as I said, geometry, shapes, lights, cameras, helpers, space warps, which I mentioned earlier, and systems. So let's have a look at geometry. Okay, you can see, as I said, there's a flyout here which allows you to look at different subtypes of geometry, and you can see we've got standard primitives, extended primitives, compound objects, particle systems, patch grids, NURB surfaces, AEC extended, dynamics objects, stairs, doors, and windows. So you can see there's, just in geometry, there's actually quite a lot of different objects that you can choose. Now, standard primitives, as the name suggests, are a bunch of objects which you can use as the basis of scenes, or you can use them to work from. You've got boxes, there we go, there's a box. You could got a cylinder, let's create a cylinder there. A tube, so we create a little tube there. Teapot, there's my beloved teapot. Let's create a few of those. So you can see there's some quite useful standard primitives that you've got there, as I said, which you can use to create little scenes. If we open up the next flyout, you can see that you've got extended primitives. These are generally, for the most part, refined versions of some of the standard primitives. As an example, we've got the chamfer box. So with a chamfer box, if you want to create a box which hasn't got hard corners, you can create your box, and then you can actually choose how soft the corners are there. There's a chamfer cylinder, same kind of thing. Create that, and you can choose just how chamfered that is. There's a capsule, let's create that, which is a sort of pill kind of shape object. Let me change the wireframes on these because they're a little bit anemic maybe. Okay, so there's a capsule, a Gengon, which is sort of, there we go, we can chamfer that. That's a Gengon, pretty strange name. A spindle, which is actually pretty much like a capsule, but this time with pointed ends. So again, you've got some pretty useful basic objects there. Let's have a look at an oil tank. There we go. So similar in some ways, I suppose, to the capsule. Again, quite useful primitives. Maybe not quite as useful as the standard primitives, but there you go. Compound objects, which are a class of geometry in all of themselves. What these generally allow you to do is to take two objects or a bunch of objects and do something special with them. So as an example, Boolean is quite a common one to do. So let me just give you a quick example of that. Create a box, let's say, and we want to cut a hole out of it, which is spherical. So we've got these two tools. I'll make this sphere a little bit more refined. Use 3D view to shaded view to actually make sure that they're intersecting each other. And now I'm going to get this cube. I'm going to go to compound objects, Boolean, and I'm going to do subtraction, and I'm going to pick this sphere to subtract from the cube. There we go, and it's cut away the shape from the cube. So there we go, max booleans. Not as bad as a lot of people make them out to be. Just have to get used to how they work exactly. So let's get rid of that object. Those are compound objects. We have particle systems, which are something that we'll come to in the second half of this DVD, which you can create as easily as that. And you can see you've got particles flying out of it. Useful for creating, you know, lots of different particle effects like snow, rain, dust, fire, smoke, those kind of things. We'll get rid of that for now. Below particle systems we have patch grids, which are a different type of surface. Most of the time in Max you'll be working with polygonal objects, but Max does actually offer higher order surfaces. In this case it offers quad patches or tri patches, and with these, if I create one, oops-a-days, let's go and do that again. You can see that it's got little handles, and it actually acts like a patch. There we are. So it's actually a soft surface, and it's got control handles which you can modify. So you can oops, let's do that again. So that way I'll use the axis tools, which is a little bit better. So you can move those around, and there we go. That's a patch surface. Specific geometry type which you might use for modeling certain objects. Below patch grids we've got NURB surfaces, again, which is more of a sort of parametric surface, similar to the sort of thing that you might see in Maya. You know, Maya is a very NURB centric package. Max has NURBs, but they're not particularly good. So most of the time people users of Max don't really use NURBs that much, but they are there if you want to dabble with them and you want to try modeling with them. And to be fair, you know, most of the standard primitives in Max will actually convert into a NURBS object. So for instance, if we take a teapot, there we go, create a teapot, right click on it, and we'll convert it to NURBS. And now it's a NURBS teapot. So there we go, you can see it's actually converted it into a NURBS surface. So those are NURBS surfaces. AC extended, these have been merged into Max in recent versions, and they're basically for the architectural visualization part of the user base, and they basically have things like foliage, primitive trees, primitive railings, walls, and these can be used with the other architectural objects, which are actually written to be quite smart. For instance, you can create a wall, and if you create, for instance, a window and put that into the wall, it'll actually make a hole in the wall automatically. So they're actually quite useful tools. So you can see you've got these AEC extended objects, stairs, doors, and windows. They're basically the four architectural geometry groups which you can use. And then you have dynamic objects, which are more legacy these days. These were actually created for the original dynamic system in Max, which isn't really used anymore. These days people use Reactor, which is a much better dynamic system, something which is much more versatile. So basically you can pretty much ignore the dynamic objects. They're not, as I said, they're not really used anymore. Okay, and that's it for geometry. The next type of creation that we can create shapes. So there are two types of shapes. There are splines and there are NURBS curves. NURBS curves are used to create NURBS surfaces, which, as I said, have many limitations in Max and aren't very well featured. So generally most people don't use NURBS curves most of the time. However, splines in Max are very well featured and have been a core feature